Hello, everyone. Today is April 15th, 2018. This is kind of a continuation of the delivery of the treasures into the mountains encircling the San Luis Valley. I'm going to assume that anyone listening to this is kind of up to date to some degree on this ongoing energy dynamic that sent me back to Crestone after 17-year absence to work with the sacred on the ark within the crest in the stone, Mount Challenger, and the golden sun disk beneath the sand dunes here. So I'm assuming that you know this information, because to try to get everybody updated on it would take a long time. So we're going to start from that point. I will have links to various articles and videos that can update you on all of this. But very quickly to say that the San Luis Valley, most specifically the Crestone area with the Mount Challenger Peak where the sacred on is located, is an ongoing energy dynamic. This is the crown chakra of the Ascension Temple, which is actually the Ascension grid for the planet, this area. And so much activity is going on here now. I mean, it's been the crown chakra of the Ascension Temple for a long time, and a lot has happened, granted, but right now there's an escalation of energies. I've been back now for a little over a year, and certain things have already been happening, but now there's a bigger push. I can feel it, and much is going on. Recently on Good Friday, we had the transfer of what Thoth is calling the Grail Logos, that is apparently holographed within a very specific ancient dweller crystal skull that had been housed in Mount Utenberg in Austria, and it was then transferred on Good Friday into a cavern area of Mount Blanca, the skull and the logos. And I was requested to procure a contemporary crystal skull as a new hosting skull, and this one would host the energies, the dynamics of the dweller skull of John Martinus, the only child, according to my sources, of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, to be, shall we say, amalgamated with another energy from the same soul of a dimensional lifetime that is guarding this whole process. And so the skull, when it was transferred, the crystal skull, literally transmorphed, changed shape, be more elongated to accommodate those energies. Now, the whole topic of the crystal skulls in regard to the dweller crystal skulls and what they mean, I will put a link for that if you are not familiar with it. So we're coming up to another, I don't even want to call it transfer, because it's actually being brought into a vibratory harmonic with this area through the Templar crystal skull and the Grail Logos it carries. Now, when the Templar skull and the Grail Logos were transferred from Mount Utenberg to Mount Blanca, that was a transfer. What is happening here that I'm about to discuss with a round table, that's why I have this picture. Obviously, this is a picture I got off the web, and it's not an exact duplicate by any means of the actual table, but it does have a resemblance, so I chose this particular picture. We'll get to that in a moment. But what is going on with this round table is not a transfer per se in the same way. It kind of is, because it's relocating an object from one place to another, So I guess I could say it is a transfer, but it's very different in the way it's being orchestrated. And I think it's an important point, so I will get to that as well. In discussing things of this nature, it's very difficult to be concise. And you hear me wandering around searching for words. Oh, it's this word. No, maybe. No, 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 it's not. It's really this word. Doesn't she know what's going on here? And actually, I don't. Not entirely. Of course not. I know a little piece, or I think I know. I feel I know. But, I'm searching for words to try to bring into context this enormous picture. Well, when I say that the sacred on exists inside Mount Challenger, well, it's on a slightly removed dimension. And yet, I do know that there are caverns physically and in our state of consciousness physically that people can go into. And one gentleman told a friend of mine, and this was just, I heard about this just relatively recently, last year sometime. After I'd already moved back, that was, he told her that he actually, this was some old guy that was a sort of a one of what we call here the hippies from the 60s culture that was kind of living not on the street. You can't live at 8,000 feet on the street in the wintertime, but he was not. People were saying, oh, well, he's just sort of an unusual character. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We have some of those. But what he told her was so consistent with what I've received, or corollary with what I've received, that, I don't think he was just, smoking a little too much. I think he was telling the truth. And he said that he had gone into physically, when he was a little bit younger and healthier, had gone into a tunnel area, followed a particular cave, and he saw these shining beings, and they were showing him things. And some of it had to do with energies that I had already picked up on. So we tend to think that another dimension is just that, another dimension. Oh, well, it's not really here. It's someplace else. It's some other realm. But that is, I'm coming to understand from Thoth and from other things that that's not the case. There are various levels of it being another dimension. We're using dimension, another dimension, is sort of a catch-all phrase because there's like a lot of different layers to that. There could be another dimension that is way another dimension, but there are also other dimensions that are just touching this dimension, just touching it, flashing in and out, flashing in and out. And when you get to that level, you're able to literally walk into it, a normal person, not with a space helmet on or anything, to be able to walk from one dimension to another. Not maybe every time you want to do it. There might be flows, ebbs and flows, like a tide, but you can catch that tide. And if you're proficient at it, you may know how to do it. Then it's not just a hapstance thing, and you can move into it. And it's here, but it's also there. And sometimes it's not so much here, and it's more there. You see, so that is what I feel, what I really truly believe from what Thoth is telling me is the case with the art, the sacred on being in the crest and the stone, the golden sun disk being under the sand dunes, and now we also have the keeper of the way, one of the dweller skulls is also in the crest and the stone mountain. Now we have the Templar skull, and its Grail Logos has been transferred into Mount Blanca, it's technically under the sand dunes because Mount Blanca, the part of the chamber that it's in, is under the sand dunes. So it's all one there. But all of these things are not that far removed, and yet they aren't, knock on wood, physically here, like, you can go and pick up a drinking cup on the table. So it's an in-between spacing. And it's very much affecting the physical here, enough so that there are sensitive devices that the deep state has, shall we say, they call them so many different things, that can detect that there's something there. That's why they're searching for these things, because it can detect, they can't detect exactly what it is, but they can detect that it's there, and they can detect a certain vibrational presence of it. That's true with all the things that are sequestered in these mountains, or any place in the world. Because certainly this is not the only place that has this type of thing going on. It is unique here for the purpose that it has. It's very unique, but they are in other places. Oh, I'm sorry. Alexa's reminding me of something. In case you heard that, that was her, my echo. So in any case, I want to oh, please, Alexa. I understood. Okay. So this is how these things work, so that I wanted to set that stage to understand that before I continue, because I'm trying to keep it on the path of seeing it in terms of quantum science, quantum physics, without getting too out there on that topic either, because it's not magical. It's not woo-woo. None of this sort of thing is. It has a basis in science. And that's not taking it outside the realm of divine source and spirituality. But that has a basis in science as well, because it created the science to hold the matrix that we see ourselves within. Some little green guys or gray ETs did not create the matrix we live in. They're part of that matrix as well. The ultimate source beingness that did this, and this is another topic entirely, has created a realm that makes sense, that is predicated on quantum dynamics. So everything I'm talking about here, from round tables to sacred arcs to crystal skulls, and then floating around in different dimensions here, and all of this crazy sounding stuff, if you bring it down to the table and you lay it out on the table, you will find it all fits. It all comes together and makes sense in a scientific modality. And so now that I've tried to make that clear the best I can, let us continue with this new object. So the table. I was preparing a video series for the portal members, and it is available for purchase as well. I will have a link down there on the Merlin Chronicles, which is a small book I wrote in 1987 and added to in 1991, I believe. And in that, there was some information that I was rereading for the first time since all these years into the video. And when I read that, that's when Thoth came through and said, take this, there's something here that is going to be coming forth, and make a note of this. This is coming next. So I'm going to read this a little bit to you. This is out of the Merlin Chronicles. And first I'm quoting from, well, let me start over here. This is from my book. The great solar pattern is an inner reflection of the central sun atoma within the earth, as well as being an outer reflection of the cosmic sun, and further, the central logos of the universe. The latter-day Atlantean wizards, such as Merlin, an Atlantean through spiritual adoption, based much of their mysteries on the inner earth realm and their genetic connection to the races inhabiting the central cavity of the planet. Now, I'm quoting here from, okay, just one moment. Why am I not seeing where I'm quoting from? Here, The Secret Tradition in Arthurian Legend by Gareth Knight. Now, this is a quote from his book. At the end of the Atlantean epoch, Merlin was charged to bring the new root race a more subtle and complex form of the plan. This new pattern was that of the round table. This added the concept of corporate responsibility through individual endeavor in place of the emphasis on hierarchy. A further advance on the previous solar pattern is that the new formula takes cognizance of forces beyond our immediate solar system. With the round table, stellar forces and patterns are taken into account, for it is indeed a form of zodiac. This teaching emanates from a cosmic center of force that is concerned with the universal evolution of consciousness as opposed to comparatively localized solar or planetary evolution. For purposes of Earth consciousness, that source of influence may be thought of as emanating from what appear to us to be the 7 stars of the constellation of the Great Bear. Well, that would be the Pleiades, of course. The 7 sisters, now we're back to Maya talking in this book. The 7 sisters of the Pleiades are the stars to which Mr. Knight is referring. These, according to Thoth, are one of the 3 governing stations of living lights for our world. Years ago, long before my interest in or knowledge of Merlin and Arthurian legend, other than what a child might glean from storybooks, my benefactor Thoth took me on a voyage etherically into a chamber beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. There, to my amazement, within a gloriously shining room, was a large round table. It contained beautiful designs, colors, and gems upon it, and it made me think of the round table in the children's books. I was puzzled at the time about this Arthurian-looking table under the Pyramid of Egypt. Now I understand that the table I saw was no doubt an archetypal model of the Arthurian version. I do not believe it was the same relic, as it was far more elaborate than the one which seated the knights. In retrospect, this episode exemplifies the connectiveness among all races and cultures, having within their mysteries the same archetypal truths and inner forms. This, of course, is most especially viable within the context of reincarnation, where souls move throughout various cultures. Thoth was Thoth of Racemus, the Egyptian, also contained genetics of Venus, the Blue Star tribe in Tibet. He was also Merlin, the mixture of Blue Star, Fairy, and Celtic, one of the souls of Merlin. And that goes on and on. But that's the little piece that I wanted to read to you. Now, that was in 1987. If we go to my Temple Doors, volume 1998, on the Grail, Alpha through Omega. And this I also have a, just a moment. Okay, where was I? That certainly broke my chain of thought. I'm going to pause again to recenter myself. Okay, when your cat is tearing down your curtain, it kind of dissembles you. So we're back to Temple Doors, 1998, The Grail, Alpha through Omega. And in this, this would have been 1998, way after I wrote that other article, over 10 years. So I was not aware of this information when I wrote that information. And the table I saw under what I thought was under the Great Pyramid, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now take a look at this. This is, we're talking about Ruta here, the Isle of Ruta of Atlantis that had ascended. When Atlantis went down, Ruta went up, so to speak. And I have a whole lot of information on that, and I recently did a video series on that. So I'll try to remember to put all these links down there where I embed this video. In any case, so this is from that series. Well, this is from that volume, first of all, Temple Doors, volume 1998. And I'm speaking about Ruta, and also the gathering place for the Grail kings and queens on Ruta. Now, Thoth is calling them Grail kings and queens. He's using a metaphorical term because these are the families, the star families that migrated from Lemuria, Mu, that Melchizedek, the Lord Melchizedek coming through Venus, but originally from Rigel, the blue star Rigel Orion, came through and set up a breeding farm in a way. I mean, it sounds awful, but no, it isn't at all awful. It's really part of the spiritual plan. It was the 7 houses of the priestesses, and these priestesses were chosen to be the receptacles of the genetics that Melchizedek brought to Earth to reconstitute the planetary spectrum at that time. There's a whole story about that. These were not slaves. These were willing females of a very high order of spirituality. All of this was done in the greatest of integrity and spiritual awareness. But in essence, it was a genetic, spiritually derived genetic breeding program, you might say. It was also there to facilitate spiritual knowledge and wisdom that had been lost even in that early age. So it was a twofold plan. And so out of that came the Grail kings and queens, as Thoth is calling them. And when Lemuria went down, they were already had migrated over to Atlantis. And at the time, Ruta was part of the continent of Atlantis, but as things broke up, it became an island. And there were situations going on where the Atlanteans got very weird, and a lot of them did at that time. And they were doing all kinds of wild genetic breeding, trying to create super people and all of this awful stuff, very much like the Anunnaki did, but that was later. History repeats itself. And so the Rutans said, we don't want any part of this. And they really just contained themselves on the Isle of Ruta, and they actually even put an energy field around it at some point. So that's a whole nother story. And I haven't even the videos I made on it, the series I made, haven't covered everything that I even have in my documents on that. But that said, so now we come to Ruta as how they brought their councils together and what they did in their little isolated space. This was before the ascension, okay? I should say rather than isolated, because that indicates that they were cut off from the world, and that's not true. I would say protected space. So I'm reading now from 1998, The Grail, Alpha through Omega. The gathering place of the Grail kings and queens was a rather simple circular building called the Sarhanuk, meaning the dragon star. It was named thus because Melchizedek was known as the dragon star, the one who came upon the fiery breath of the dragon to earth. This was the ancient description of the brilliant Merkaba that descended to earth, transporting the being Melchizedek, who incidentally was at least one of the souls of Melchizedek, was Thoth, who transported him from Venus to this realm, a story which is still remembered and told from all the ages after all those ages had passed. The inside of the Sarhanuk was composed of 2 concentric circles, the first being a narrow hall width around the circumference of the second. This outer circle was a hall of generation, within which was inscribed the history of the Melchizedekian generations. There were also niches in this hallway provided for talismans and other objects of sacred significance to the Grail families. Positioned in the center of the large inner circle was the Mobad, or crystal round. This was a large dodecanal dodecanal 12-faced table made of pure quartz crystal. So if it was 12-faced, it was sort of round, but obviously it had an interesting shape to it. Dodecanal. I wish I could say that word. Inside the crystal were thin wisps of plant form known as Imasia. This plant was one of the ancient survivors of another era when plant life was more highly developed and sensitive to the energies of spirit. Imasia lived entirely on the piezoelectric currents created by pressures within crystal and rock in the earth. Thus, they could be found attached to rocks and often inside cracks within stones. They often grew inside crystals as they were forming. The Imasia were especially fond of crystals. They responded to any piezoelectric currents running through the crystal by discharging light from their hair-like tendril forms. Sealed in transparent crystal, the Imasia resembled golden fern-like angel hair that came to life, firing illumined charges through the crystal within the high-level sentient minds of the Grail priest kings and priestess queens. Interacted with the crystal, the Imasia was embedded within. I really read that poorly. I'm trying to say that the minds of the Grail people that were there around the table connected to the Imasia. You know, there was a synchronicity, and this allowed the energy to move from the mental field of the Grail queens and kings into the Imasia and back and forth. The high level through the energy of these kings, queens triggered the same response as the piezoelectric currents of the earth within the Imasia. Although an impressive sight, there was a much greater purpose for the Grailborn having created their mobad from quartz containing the miracle plant. When the wispy tendrils trapped in the crystal table lit up, they also opened an etheric channel in their immediate proximity, which cleared away all astral density and thus astral forms, thereby providing a stronger threshold of attunement to the higher levels of the other world. Now, what I don't say here, but though this prompted me to say now, is that bear in mind in the period of time when this table was created, there were a lot of astral stuff going on around the planet. Oh my goodness, there we go again. From different sources. Things that were not working right in the whole planetary grid that were causing a lot of astral energies to come down and collect, especially concerning what the Atlanteans, the other Atlanteans, were doing at that time. They were drawing this stuff in because they were trying to do all these wonderful creations, but they were not doing it with sense and integrity, and this was causing problems. So even though they, maybe, I don't know if they had their protective field up around them, perhaps this is a table that did it. I'm not sure of all these little finer points, but they wanted to have a clear space to operate, and they needed to have that. So that was one of the main things the table did. However, I did not go into detail as to regard to all the things the table did and what it was connected to, and I probably didn't know at the time that I wrote this. So to continue about the table, upon the surface of the mobad were carved 12 sacred symbols representing the 12 thresholds of a Mazzaroth, the command threshold of the zodiac, with the 13th Mazzalothic portal beyond the Mazzarothic zodiac, represented by a symbol in the center of the table. It doesn't say what the symbol looked like. These inscriptions were inlaid with gemstones. In their otherworld work, these Grail kings, queens entered various channels of light pathing attuned to one or more of the Mazzarothic thresholds. The mobad was programmed to accommodate them in this passage. The Sarhonic housing the mobad of the Grailborn was situated on the Atlantean Isle of Ruta in a small alpine valley nestled between three mountain peaks, Umar, Talechet, and Moria. These three peaks were called the children of Zor, Z-H-O-R. Zor was the eagle god, or more aptly according to the belief of the Atlanteans, the Divi, or nature power of high places. Ruta was the portion of Atlantis that did not succumb to the sea in the final deluge, which swept the rest of the continent asunder. Instead, Ruta, like Brigadoon, ascended into another electromagnetic zone of the earth where it remains to this day. Although the Grail priest kings and priest queens had already departed Atlantis by the time of Ruta's ascension, one of the guardians of the Sarhonic remained. Removed from the effect of time as we understand it, this guardian is still in attendance at the dragon star. His name is Chesed, Chsed, also known as the Eternal Watcher. It was he whom Hestor, Merlin's father, visited in his otherworld journeys. This being also became the guide of both Merlin and Arthur. And this goes on, of course, with all the information in this issue. Well, there's one other part, just one other part here. Thus, the Grail families and legends were underway long before King Arthur and his Round Table of Grail Knights. Much of those legends, however, find their roots in the tales of the early Grail priest kings and priest queens, as is witnessed by the Round Table itself. As we will see, these Grail lineages continued on in somewhat altered form from the demise after the demise of Atlantis. In the remaining age of the great civilization, another migration began, which allowed the Grail bloodlines to be perpetuated on Earth elsewhere. And so that continues. Now, I did want, Sophie's sort of urged me to go back here to the, because the shape of the table is kind of important for this whole thing. So I'm going to go back to that. The word I could not pronounce, the 12-sided faceted thing. Whoops. Where did I read that? The Dodecagonal. I just simply cannot pronounce it. But that is 12-faced table. Now, the crystalline part is in the center of it, he's saying, and that has the facing. But there's a rim. There's a golden alchemical rim around it, and that's round. So you have the round rim, and inside it's placed within it, so it all sort of merges together, and it still creates a round table. But the energies of that crystalline focus are important. Now, this is not the same table that I saw in the vision that I read to you previously that appeared to be under the Great Pyramid. I say appeared to be because it is and it isn't. In other words, there's a projection of it underneath the Great Pyramid. If you walk through that projection field, you are in, voila, you're in this chamber with this particular table that is not exactly the same as the Mobad table that's still in Ruta in the ascended version, but it is an offspring of it. That's the best way I can put it. The table is kind of a living thing because you've got these plants that are growing in there. And crystal is kind of a living thing too. So you combine that and you can say it's a living thing, even though it's being housed in an outer casing. That is what we're talking about. So the table that I saw, in which I walked through the field to get to it, but it's not really there under the Great Pyramid as I thought it was, is a child of it. In other words, I'm receiving that before Ruta ascended, and they knew at some point this was going to happen, but they didn't know, actually when they ascended, they didn't even know they had ascended right away. So they didn't have the exact moment when it was going to happen. They had to kind of figure it out. Ooh, we've ascended. Kind of like people pass over the other side, they don't know they're dead first, you know. But in any case, the table itself, they knew it was going to happen sometime, okay, or that it was very likely to. So they created a child table, and they positioned it in a dimensional field that would be able to be accessed through the Great Pyramid. Through one of the, so when you enter the chamber, there it is, but it's not really there. Okay, so we have that under wraps. Now, that table can be projected, not only the table, the whole chamber. It's not a big chamber, but the whole chamber with the table can be projected through certain force fields that are created. One of the objects that can, not the only one, but one of the objects that can create this force field. Well, let me put it this way. I've got to start over because it's not quite correct. So you have to get back to my words and try to find the right ones that connect to what I'm trying to tell you. The the Grail Logos. It's called a Logos because Logos is word, divine word. It's a sounding field. So the Grail Logos that is being projected from the Templar Dweller skull, it has the ability to project this Mobad field. Not Mobad, I'm sorry, that's not the right word. Thoth is calling this other table, he said, let's call it the Rastaru. So we're going to call it that, the Rastaru table. It has the ability to project that whole chamber with the table into another space where it can be seen and experienced, not only seen. It's not just a picture. You could sit down at the table, you could touch the table. You're literally in that field once you walk into that energy space. So that's why I was struggling before saying it's not being transferred. It's being projected. So now that the Grail Logos, housed within the Dweller Crystal Skull, is located in the Mount Blanca chamber beneath the sand dunes, that projection field can be opened and is being opened to project the chamber with the table. The actual turn-on point when this projection will take place, let me make sure of this. Well, it's actually tomorrow, as from my time field here. That would be March 16th, 2018. If you want to follow it in a linear way, that is when the projection will begin. And so, let me collect my thoughts here for a moment and see what else is coming through. Well, I'm going to take a moment here. I'm going to take a moment here to show you the hosting skull, not the actual dweller, of course, but the hosting skull that Thoth chose from eBay through me for the connection to the dweller of the Templar skull of John Martinus. John Martinus merged with this other being that is a guardian element, and his name escapes me at the moment. But it's the same soul. And actually, as I say on the other video, it is the soul of Thoth, but in another form, in another presence. So this is him, and I'm going to just switch over to another picture here. Here he is yesterday being held up by Sholar Michael Agavi to the sun at the water blessing ceremony we had in Crestone, Colorado, here at a portal point, a very important portal point it's part of the whole area that contains the stone mandala that we work with as well. And so I was instructed by Thoth, asked by Thoth he doesn't like me to say instructed because he's not instructing me to do anything. He's merely requesting. And that's always been a very, very important stress from all of the beings that have worked with me, even before Thoth. We are requesting. You don't have to do this. Of course, psychologically, are you going to turn them down? But it's important because, yeah, I could say, I don't feel like something is right for me at the time, and I could choose not to do it. And thunder and hail would not come down on my head. There are always other ways to do things, and there are always other people to do them. No one is indispensable. So, I do have an out if I want it, but I don't want it. So anyway, that was a little aside. But here we are with the skull. And I was requested to bring this, and I did, and it went through a ceremony there, and it was blessed in the water. We took it down to the creek, and it was baptized there, and it was really beautiful. But I wanted to show you the beauty of this particular skull, and I got it for a song. It should not have been that inexpensive. It really shouldn't. It should have been about 5 times more expensive than what I paid for it. But there it was, just waiting for me. And so I'm going to, but it kind of looks small in Michael's hand because he's a big fella and he's got a big hand. So I'm going to show you how it looks with me. My little glamour shot here with the skull. But you can see, of course, I am a small person, but you can see it's pretty formidable in size, actually, as crystal skulls go. And here it is, right here, next to the White Queen and the rest of the skulls that you see present on the matrix, the altar matrix that I have in my home. So what about this table? What is the purpose of it? Why is it here, or sort of here? It's being projected here. That's not an illusion. So its energy point now is registering here. And is it still registering under the Great Pyramid? I'm receiving that it is not. Tomorrow when it is transferred, the register point, the grounding point, will be here and not under the Great Pyramid. I say here in Mount Blanca, which is just across the way. So what is the purpose of this? Well, remember, it's not an exact duplicate of the Mobad. It's a child of it, but a child has its own life. It garners information, knowledge, wisdom, and genetics from its parents, and it carries that through. But it also creates a new life in a new direction. And that's the truth of this table, which is a semi-living being. And Thoth is telling me that the Mobad, as well as the child, does have a intelligent presence. See, we confine things to understanding either non-sentient objects that don't have souls and sentient beings that do have souls. Now, some of us believe that animals have souls, and certainly I do. Thoth calls them soulize because they operate just a little bit differently in how they transfer from one being to another and all that. But they are souls, and we have souls, but a rock doesn't have a soul, a crystal doesn't have a soul. And a plant doesn't have a soul, according to what most people think. A plant doesn't have a soul, actually, but it has an intelligence. It has a spiritual connection. So a soul is a certain operative system for spiritual dynamics that collects and moves collectively from one pattern to another. So we can say, I lived before because my pattern was in this other body. But there's other ways for divine intelligence to impregnate its presence. And it does in every rock, every blade of grass, every little pebble, every piece of sand, everything. It's more dimensionally orchestrated in a beautiful crystal than it is in a tin can. A tin can's been put through all kinds of stuff before it became a tin can. So holding that frame of reference in mind, if you can, I can barely myself. Back to the child table, the Rastaru, and he's taking that name for a reason. We're going to get to that in a moment. It has, like its parent table, a divine connection operative within the little plants inside it, as well as the crystal itself, as well as the sacred geometry. Now, the sacred geometry of the table is duplicated from the sacred geometry of the Mobad. But the plant structure is growing its own tendrils. It's correlative. You could say it's almost the genetic field, but it has its own growth, and it's going to continue to grow. Now, when it touches ground here and creates its point tomorrow, those Imacea tendrils are going to immediately start developing in a new way. Not entirely new, but in some ways, to accommodate its work in this field. And it's saying, we touched home, here's the field, I'm connecting to it. Okay, what needs to be synergized here? And that's what's going to take place. Of course, it's going to be connecting to the sacred On, to the Manasari with the sphere within the On. It's going to be still connective, very connective to the the dweller skulls and the ones that are here present in this field. And incidentally, the White Queen, even though she's still very much within the dweller skull, is still very much within the chamber in Kauai, in Mount Waialeale. Her she's bilocated, you know, holographically speaking, like they like to do, to join the keeper of the way here. So she's bilocated within the crest in the stone as well. So all of these things are going to be taken into consideration by this CD disc. It almost looks like one here on this table. By this programming, living creature programming computer. And because that's essentially what it is. It's a high ordained living computer. And as it does so, it's going to start reacting to that. It's going to start attempting to organize the field. Now that's the moment of beauty, because we have a lot of disorganization going on. We have in a long time, but right now, especially in this continent that the you know the device is sitting in or pointing in, we have a lot of disorganization going on. It's reaching critical levels. It is all over the planet, but here is like X marks the spot where everything is stretching out to. So with the help of various organizational fields and tapping into the sacred on and these other, it can bring together a living experience of creating patterns of divine order. Now that doesn't mean, unfortunately, that everything is just going to fall into place. It just doesn't work that way, because we're all busy bees around here, and all our little brains and minds are doing all kinds of things. We have our own little Imasia tendrils going out and doing things, and we're disrupting a lot of stuff. I say we, I'm talking about, you know, the royal we of the planetary human consciousness, you know, the mass consciousness, and especially here right now in this continent and what's going on in the White House and all of that. So it can't just fix everything all tidy and say, okay, everything's fine. No, it can't do that, but it can help us. It can help us tremendously. And it's a step-by-step process. This has been planned for eons and eons and eons of time. And now it's coming, it's being fulfilled step by step by step. And this table, this Mobed, this not, I keep wanting to call it Mobed, this Rastaru table is another aspect of that. But as a computer, it needs ensouled energies to work with it. That's where all of us come into the picture to some degree. If you willingly open up to standing around the table, so to speak. But it also has some higher up ensouled ones who are working with it, and that's where we come to the next stage here, what I want to share with you. Okay, we come to the Templa Seratum that I spoke about on a video a while back, not too long ago, last year sometime, but actually it was in October, I believe, something like that. And here's the video on it. I will put a link to this on the page I'm embedding the video I'm creating. This is the overlighting order of the regenerated order of the Temple of Solomon, of which I am a Templar, and I have the priory of the White Stone here in Crestone. Crestone is also the seat of the, let's say, the spiritual center of the temple order, especially on this continent. So obviously there is a connection between the table and the Templar Order of Solomon Spiritual Center being here, and my priory and the priory of the Ark of Ascension, William Bueller's and Edie Cooper's priory, and Robin Ray's have a presence here with their priory, although they also equally have one in Santa Fe. So, you know, there's energy here of the Templar spirit and actually an embedded focus here. And here we have the round table, so to speak, materializing for its purpose here as well. So the Templus Seratum is an overlighting order, and this has come through me. This is not something that is officially stated by the Order of the Temple of Solomon, but it has come through me that there is this overlighting order called the Templus Seratum, or that's the name that was given to me. And this video speaks about it. And the Templus Seratum, very briefly, are on the ascended Isle of Ruta. And they are part of that original Grail function. Now, the Grail families migrated on the main part of them, but we have certain individuals along with the keeper that I read about, but he's separate. He's not part of this Seratum. Has a different position in all this, and that's not our topic right now, so I won't go into it. But these souls have a presence there. Now, one of the souls is Thoth. I mean, he gets around a lot, but they have other incarnations. They're in other places, but they're also here on the Isle of Ruta, and they're holding this position, and they are overlighting, according to what I receive, the Order of the Temple of Solomon in its resurgent form, its 21st century form, which is much different in many ways than the old form. It certainly carries the integrity and the spiritual mission of the old order, but it is doing so in a 21st century accommodation and awareness. And so the Templus Seratum members will now be able to connect far more fully with us here in this time frame through this child table. In other words, when they gather around the Mobad on the table on the Isle of Ruta, they are also gathering around the child table, the Rastaru, here in the Sacred Valley, the Grail Valley, because it's really sort of it's not a round valley. It's more shaped to me, it's shaped like a flame, like a divine flame, but it's surrounded by the holy mountains, and it is the largest alpine valley, I believe, in the world. At this height, it might be at this height, which is 8,000 feet, something like that. But anyway, if I start getting into facts and figures, I'm getting into shady areas because my little brain doesn't do that very well. Outside of the Akasha, that is. So anyway, it's an impressive valley, and it's got all these mountains around it. And I'm wanting to call it, and Thoth is sort of encouraging me to call it the Grail Valley. But, there are other Grail Valleys on the planet. So let's call it, wait for it, the Grail Flame. It's like a Grail Flame Valley. I'll find a better way to state that, but it's this valley is the flame of the Grail. And so the Mobad table and its child Rastaru can, like two computers synchronizing and talking to one another. Like you have your cell phone that talks to your computer and vice versa, or whatever. You've got these two fields conversing with one another starting tomorrow in our time understanding. And as they start doing this directly, when the Templus Seratum gather around the Mobad, they are gathering also around the Rastaru. If we could walk into that chamber, and indeed, I stress, if you knew how to do it, you could do it. You wouldn't have to be an ascended being to walk into this chamber when it's set down into the cavern here. You would just know how to get into that frequency, just walk into that frequency just a certain way. If you could get, into the cavern, and then you did it just like that old fellow did, down that I was talking about, and he called them blue beings, with shining light. And he went there and they showed him a crystal and they actually communicated with him. You could have that happen too, if you happened to walk in just right and got into that field. So you would see, if they were holding a meeting, so to speak, you would see them around the table. You would be able to communicate with them in some way, just as those beings did with the man that walked into their field unknowingly. So it's not that far removed from us, as amazing as it sounds. But other than a really fabulous experience, what does this really mean? Again, we're talking about an aid, a strong aid to help reorganize the order that's missing in our current reality spectrum on the planet, and especially here in the United States. One of the things that Sylvia, the lady that alerted us that this transfer needed to be made, but she didn't know where. She just knew it probably needed to go somewhere in North America or on this continent, because this is what needed it here. It needed the Grail Logos transfer. It needed to come to this continent for now. And I believe she was absolutely right about that. And certainly it needed to be right here where it is now, because this is the place that the buck stops, and it also starts for karmic reasons, for dharmic reasons, for a lot of reasons. So this energy field of the Rastaru table, as we're calling it, with its Templus Seratum gathering, will be able to orchestrate, just as Merlin did in the ancient times, new connective fields of consciousness. They aren't giving us something. They are helping us to find our way back and forward in time, to find our place where we can find our own organization, our own inner core of balance. And when we do, all this, puppet show that's going on around us will simply evaporate. One way or another, it will leave the stage. We also have these earth changes going on, just as the Rutans had to deal with when they were sitting there as part of Atlantis, and they knew what was coming. I'm not saying that certain ones of us are just going to ascend overnight. We know that there's an ascension program going on this planet, but we also know that these earth changes could affect us before then. Now, it's really another topic, so I'm not going to get off on it too much here, but I'm just going to say that this whole program of bringing these sacred treasures into the field of the crown chakra of the Ascension Temple, of the Ascension Grid, is really important right now. And certainly the Rastaru is very definitely one of those, for the importance of reorganizing the energy of the field. It's the Merlin program, but it's hyped to another level. It's brought to another level. And of course, Thoth being one of the souls of Merlin, being within the Templus Seratum, and in so many other places and ways connected to all of this, is a major orchestrating being of this whole dynamic. Now, I do want to mention, just to make it even more confusing, I do want to mention something else, and that is, let me see if I can find them here, the 72 dweller beings as the Alahim Rastaru. Here we come to the name. Now, Thoth is speaking about the 72 actual beings whose crystal skulls are the dweller crystal skulls. Thoth is one of these beings, and to understand the integration, the 12 Templus Seratum beings are among the 72 dweller beings. There are 12 of those. Okay. Now, these dweller beings, in their form of the Alahim Rastaru, that is the new earth vibration of these beings. Because we have to, for us, they have to kind of chop things up like chopped liver, because, it's all one stream to them. But we're in this time thing, we've got past, present, and future, and all of this, and we have all these little things divided in all these little categories. So they're trying to bring it down so we can understand it in our little categorized minds. So they're saying, okay, the dweller beings in their in their new earth form, we're going to call the Elohim Rastaru. So the dweller beings in that form are also present and working with the Rastaru table. Now let's read about this. It's just pretty short. See how short it is? I'm just going to read this really quick. Right after the Osiris arising crystalline matrix was installed here in Crestone, Colorado, that's my little, it sounds like a big deal, but it's my table of the hosting skulls for some of these dweller beings. And this was, according to Thoth, an important part of establishing the flow of the Osiris arising project with all of this that's going on here. So that said, I received information on the 72 dweller beings as composing a vibrational assembly Thoth is calling the Elohim Rastaru. This is a new earth focused path for the dweller beings to orchestrate the phasing of the ascension dynamics coming through the sacred On, not as a physical box, but as a streaming interdimensional Merkaba. Thus, as the Elohim Rastaru, they are interacting with this planet from the future New Earth star. Elohim in the Alui first language means to bring to conscious awareness, to offer from the inner realm, to uphold into the light, and some other variations. Rastaru in ancient Egyptian is the name for the Gaza plateau, but it is much more. No, I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. Rastau, R-A-S-T-A-U, Rastau in ancient Egyptian is the name for the Giza plateau, but it is much more than that. Rastaru is actually in the first language, meaning the plane of manifestation of divine principle, as in the first moment of creation of the universe, creation of earth, creation of the original Adam Kadmon, humanity. Creation of anything formed directly through first principle and not an offshoot subsystem. Well, that's interesting because you could say, well, the table that he's calling the Rastaru is a subsystem because it's the child of the original Mobed, but it's not a lesser than version. Are you a subsystem of your parents? No, I don't think so. You're a fully blown creational principle, but you did come out of your parents' DNA. You were a child of something, of someone, child of God. You're a child of your parents. So we mustn't look at this table, the Rastaru table, as a subsystem by any means. It is a first principle. But it's also containing the first principle, as the Mobed does. It contains that idea, that knowledge form that allows us to work with that to bring things back into order. As Thoth Muzurud. Now this is from, okay, this is a quote from Thoth, from the history of his becoming into earth. So this was another embodiment of Thoth, the first Thoth embodiment of his that came. We're not talking about Melchizedek. We're talking about him as a Thothic principle. As Thoth Muzurud, I came with an Aveska of light, a Merkaba of golden and blue-white fire from Rigel through the Asvetas, the belt of Orion, and descended into Rastaru, which is Rastau, but he says that Rastau is sort of an aberration of the original name, Rastaru, the etheric manifold of the plane of Giza. And of course, where was this table's last focal point? In Giza. And now the focal point is being moved to here. Okay, so let me read that again because I chopped it up. So it's Thoth Muzurud. I came within a Veska of light, a Merkaba of golden white fire from Rigel through the Asvetas, descended into Rastaru, the etheric manifold of the plane of Giza, and that was his history there. Now, thus the Elohim Rastaru open the scroll of the inner and present to the consciousness realm the first principle dynamics that will take us into the new earth. So you have these two principal forms that are working with the Rastaru table. You have the Templum Seratus, Templum, I can't even say all these things, Templus Seratum, the Templus Seratum. I mean, it's such a joke that someone with acute dyslexia would be asked to say all these names and keep them all in sync in my head. You know, it's like, ah. Anyway, the Templis Serratum, who are indeed part of the Elohim Rastaru. So, you know, all is one. But it's important that we understand that they're working both as the overriding order of the Templars from Ruta, and they're also working as part of the greater 72 dwellers in a new earth capacity for the earth. You know, these different energetics is what is important, not the people and the circumstance, but the energetics and how they relate through the people and the circumstance. So, where are we going from here? Let's see. I know this video is getting longer and longer. Really, I'm trying to keep it as short as possible, but I have not been too successful thus far. I think we're almost concluded. Let me take a look at what needs to be said next. And so Thoth asked me to go to the bookshelf, the very, very, very few books I have left, which are hardly none. I used to have a very extensive library, and I wish I had kept many of the books I now no longer have. But thankfully, I managed to hold on to The Secret Tradition and Ethereal Legend by Gareth Knight. Really a marvelous book. And I first purchased this book, in the early 1980s. And I probably have not opened it since the 1990s for sure. And so I went and got it, and I opened it. And on the page I opened it on, I can see I've highlighted something. So I read it, and it says, Merlin's magical technology is traditionally held to be concerned with tapping and channeling magnetic earth currents of a subtle but powerful nature. I'm really being stressed by Thoth to say there's no coincidence that he wanted me to do the whole Merlin Chronicles book and do a whole, commentary on it for my portal members. And I said it's also available for purchase. Because that wasn't just for them, it was for me too, because I needed to bring that forth again into the matrix that I'm holding here with the the crystal skulls and the crystal sapphire elixir and all of that. I say I'm holding. I'm simply like, trying to just, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm part of it in some way, and he wanted to bring this up to me again so that that field can enter my experience and then open this door so that I would be receptive to this whole thing with the Mobad table and all of that. You see, I have to feel these energies. I absolutely have to feel them. I could just be reading it out of the Akasha, or I could be receiving it without just, connecting. And if I do that, I'm saying I'm not going there because, that would drive me nuts. It would be like just creating these fantasies of all over the place. I have to feel it. When I feel it in my internal being, then it's real to me. Now, I can't say that it's real. It's real to me. And when it's real to me, I can act with integrity. And I can say to you, this is real to me. Does it feel real to you? That's the question in the ethers. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But after I have expressed that, I turn it loose, and it's up to you what you do with it. And my conscience is clear. So I have to feel it. So that's why he has to bring it to me in these ways, and he wants me to feel it. I mean, it's not like, he's accommodating me. He wants me to feel it. I say the energy that is Thoth and the whole thing, it has to come true to me before I can deliver it to anyone else. So I know that's a long story, but I think it's an important part in understanding where all this is coming from me, through me, by me. So when I created this matrix here through their guidance, I was understanding that it was part of me in a way, and I was part of it. So now, back to what I was saying. Thoth wishes to stress here that this whole concerted effort of what we're doing in this valley, but most especially the part that deals right now with the table, the Rastaru table, is coming from the field that Merlin came from. Indeed, the whole thing is, even the ark, the whole package. But the table really expresses that. And with the table, we have the ability to have a great aid in recirculating, connecting the wires that have been blown out or eroded in the magnetic grid of the planet, and the whole, not just the magnetics, electromagnetics, but the whole crystalline matrix. And in doing so, we also help to heal the planet. Of course, we're healing it only to a certain level, and then we're transforming. We're taking it with us, that healed portion, into the next realm. So, but at the same time, it has to be healed to a certain extent. And Thoth had told me this before I read. The scientists are saying that the magnetics are being healed around the polar caps, and they can't figure out why. It's getting better instead of worse. It should be getting worse. But you see, certain things, certain aspects of this planet have to be healed before we can actually leave it, like leave this matrix and take all the vibrant parts of it with us to the next realm. So that's part of what this table is doing, but it's not doing it alone. It's a mechanism, and it's working with the Templa Seratum, the Alahim Rastaru, the Sacred On, the Grail Logos, the 72 Greller Skulls, and so on and so on and so on and so on. It's all coming together, but the table is spinning the magic right now. It's the sacred cauldron, and it's allowing this to become truly operative. It's saying, okay, we're rolling up our sleeves now, and we're getting down to business. The table gets down to business. The knights gather around the table, they get down to business. It's a similar principle. Okay, I'm almost through here, but I'm going to add this one thing, and that is that we need to understand that all of this that we're relating here, all that's in the valley and here in the San Luis Valley that's forming and that we're working with for the whole ascension principle of the planet, is part of the solar mysteries, you could say. It's part of the solar program. And when we say solar, we're not just speaking of the sun of our solar system, or even the Hunabku at the center of the galaxy. We're speaking about something much bigger than that, because solar represents the star suns, all the star suns. And the star suns are the living lights. They are where they're in the angelic realms. That's what they are. So it is a program that has been put forth from that angelic station that is all encompassing. Is there something beyond the solar program? Well, I'm sure there is. There's always something more. But right now, this planet, that's what it's operating under and has been. And that's the principle through which it will ascend. And so Merlin was orchestrating the solar principle in his time, at the time, how it was needed at that time. And in many ways, it did not succeed. It was successful to some degree, but it failed in other ways, and not really to the failing of Merlin, although he had his role in it as a human being, a very advanced human being, but nevertheless a human, because Thoth was not the only soul of Merlin, remember. Thoth is an incredibly advanced soul, but he was one of the, I wouldn't call it overlighting, but active on a higher level station. And the operative soul, the body soul, is the one that makes the final decisions. I'm not putting blame on that soul. I'm just saying that he had his role, and it was a very difficult role. Hey, failures don't come they come from people that try very hard to do the right thing. Goodness knows I've had my share of them, and I try very hard to do the right thing. So, it happens, okay? So a lot of what is being reformed now is coming through the Reformation. And I know this sounds like a big thing, but coming through the Reformation of the Templar order on the earth, this order of the Temple of Solomon, it has its thing that's going on in the outer way, and it's doing the best it can to do what it needs to do for the planet and to help people in sacred activism and to have its also hidden rider, its esoteric aspect and all of that, and it's doing good works, and it's going to continue to do good works. But there is a deeper program of light that is emanating through it. And that program of light is connecting to, more specifically, to the solar program that is being exemplified, at least in this speaking right now, through the Rastaru round table and its Mobad parent. And so this consciousness is one that in the older times, the original Templars, when they were the Templar order, they tried very hard to do this too, and they failed in a lot of ways. But they're back, and now they're trying to do it with a greater awareness and in a time frame that will allow them more mobility. As badly as it seems right now, it's not the Middle Ages, believe me. That was much worse. And they have a presence of mind because of the culture that they've been brought up in. It's different from that very confining culture of the medieval period. So all of this is taking place to help them do what they need to do. And this table being brought into the valley is going to help them even more. Oh, there's always more to be said, but I need to conclude this video to make it more practicable for everyone to listen to, since it's not broken down into pieces. So thank you for listening, and we are going to be continuing these topics, believe me.